On July 16, 1969, as the world watched the Apollo 11 launch, there was this one little phrase, tucked away in the final seconds of the countdown, a phrase that hinted at an incredible, almost invisible system that was battling the very spin of our planet. To really get what was going on, we have to zoom in on those last few nail-biting moments. So picture it. You've got the most powerful machine humanity has ever built, rumbling on the pad. The countdown is ticking away, minutes become seconds. Every single check has been done, and the final sequence is a go. At this point, the mission's fate rests entirely on the rocket's own ability to find its way. And then, you hear it, that calm voice of NASA commentator Jack King. 15 seconds, guidance is internal. Now that might just sound like another bit of technical jargon, but that simple statement was huge. It meant the rocket was now flying blind, completely on its own, trusting its own brain to get it to the moon. So what was really happening in that moment? What did it take to get a machine that massive to a point where it could trust itself to fly? Well, that's the secret we're going to unpack right now. Okay, so here's the core idea. The Saturn V's guidance system wasn't looking outside for help. It worked by constantly measuring how its own speed and direction had changed from the exact spot where it started. And that means its success depended entirely on one thing, knowing its starting position with absolute flawless precision. And right there, that created a gigantic problem for the engineers. I mean, how in the world do you find a perfectly fixed point for a rocket that's sitting on the surface of a giant spinning marble? See, the Saturn V had a flight path programmed into it down to the tiniest detail. Its y-axis had to point north-south, the z-axis east-west, and the x-axis had to point perfectly, straight up. But here's the catch. Because the Earth is always spinning, that perfectly straight up was always changing. Even the tiniest error at launch would grow and grow until the rocket was thousands of miles off course in space. Think of it like a self-driving car. It's programmed to start at point A, accelerate, and turn right to get to point B. And it works perfectly. But now, what if we move its starting point just a little bit before it begins? It follows the exact same instructions, accelerate, turn right, but now it ends up at point C, a completely different place. That's exactly the problem the Saturn V was up against. So the solution actually begins deep inside the rocket itself, with a device that could hold its position in space with unbelievable accuracy, a super advanced gyroscope. This whole system lived inside something called the instrument unit. You can think of it as the rocket's brain. It's this big ring that sat right on top of the third stage, just below the Apollo spacecraft. And it's inside this ring where all the real magic was happening. Now, if you're picturing a simple toy gyroscope, you gotta think way bigger. A basic gyro just uses a spinning disc that wants to stay stable, but the Saturn V's platform was way more sophisticated. It had 3 gyros, and anytime they sensed even the slightest rotation, they'd send a signal to tiny motors that would immediately push back with the exact opposite force. It wasn't just stable, it was actively fighting to stay perfectly still. But even that incredible, unblinking platform needed an outside reference to get its bearings before launch. And that reference, well, it came from a secret beam of light, shot from a hidden bunker. Seriously. The engineers really had 2 big problems to solve. Getting the rocket aligned north-south and east-west, that was the easier part. They used these 2 super-sensitive pendulums that were literally floating on a cushion of air. Gravity would always pull them perfectly level, giving the guidance system a flat reference. But aligning the up direction, that critical x-axis, that was a whole different ballgame. The solution was sitting about 200 meters away from the launch pad. That's roughly the length of 2 football fields. And it was hidden away in a reinforced underground bunker built right into the launch ramp. You couldn't even see it, but it was one of the most important parts of the entire mission. Okay, so check this out. From inside that bunker, a device called a theodolite shot a super precise infrared beam up into a tiny little window on the instrument unit. Inside the rocket, a set of prisms would catch that beam and reflect it right back to the bunker. If the rocket wasn't perfectly aligned, the returning beam would be slightly off. So the system would tell the guidance platform, hey, rotate a little, until that beam came back perfectly, meaning the alignment was dead on. And the precision here is just mind-blowing. This system could align the guidance platform to within 1/1000th of a degree. To give you some perspective, that's like trying to hit a single grain of sand from over 50 meters away. It's an almost impossibly small margin for error. But, of course, there was one last problem. All of this incredible precision depended on the rocket being perfectly still. And a 363-foot-tall rocket sitting on the coast of Florida is never perfectly still. Yeah, what happens when the wind blows? A slight breeze could make that whole massive structure start to sway, and that would throw off that incredibly precise beam of light, undoing all that hard work. And we're not talking about a tiny little vibration here. In strong winds, the very top of the Saturn V could actually sway back and forth by more than 30 centimeters. That's about a foot. That's a huge variable you have to account for. The solution was just so elegant. They used a third prism. So you had the first two prisms inside the instrument unit doing all the alignment work, but this third prism was mounted on the outside of the rocket. The theodolite in the bunker used this external prism as a moving target, constantly tracking exactly how much the rocket was swaying. It could then use that data to adjust its aim for the internal prisms. It was literally aligning a moving target in real time. It's genius. So let's put it all together. For 5 hours, 5 whole hours before launch, this whole system was running. The gyros are spinning, and that secret beam from the bunker is constantly talking to the rocket, making these tiny, continuous corrections to fight against the Earth's rotation and the sway from the wind. And this just keeps going, right up until 15 seconds before liftoff. That's when the link was finally cut. And that brings us right back to this moment. That line, it's not just a piece of commentary. It's the grand finale of a 5-hour-long, incredibly precise and totally invisible dance between a bunker on the ground and a rocket aiming for the moon. It's the exact moment the Saturn V finally knew, with absolute, unshakable certainty, which way was up. It just makes you wonder, right? When we look back at these incredible achievements, how many other brilliant, hidden solutions like this one were quietly working in the background just to make the impossible happen?